Chinese films usually get very small release in the US. We have this question. So in one of your reviews, you said, well, most of the conversation about Asian films in the West revolves around action movies and festival authors. Here's yet another underexplored genre where Hollywood filmmaking has fallen behind the professionalism and experimentation of the East. Can you elaborate on your take on the popularity of two extremes in Asian cinema?
It has like a long history with the reception of Asian films in the West. Like on the one hand, there's the Arthouse system in the US, which is where almost all foreign language films get shown. West could travel through an Arthouse circuit, and the parameters and the tastes of that circuit were established like in the 1950s and 60s, when Janus Films started playing Godard and Truffaut and Antonioni and Bresson, and films from Europe, from France, Italy, Germany, Russia, and Japan. Those still are the ones that are most likely to get played on the US art house circuit. It's still that same system in place, despite the fact that France and Italy haven't been the centers for film culture in the world since like the 50s and 60s, whereas places like Hong Kong and Taiwan and Korea and India are much more interesting, formally, generically, just in the star power and as much fun as their movies are. Just any way you can look at it, you're going to find more of interest in Korea than you will in Italy. Yet an Italian film is much more likely to get distribution on the art house circuit in the US. I think that's starting to change somewhat. I think Parasite is like a really good example of how that is starting to change. A movie like that and The Handmaiden before it, while those aren't the two films that I would pick, it's still a good sign to see them breaking through in this way that Korean films never had before. And the same goes for Chinese films. On the other hand, you have kind of the grindhouse tradition of Kungfu and heroic bloodshed cinema and its reception in the US, which distributors would dump like these edited and badly dubbed prints of 70s Hong Kong movies into downtown theaters in inner cities. And that was people's introduction to Hong Kong cinema. Large number of the audience could see the artistry on display there in the performers, the martial arts, and the directors. But just the fact of their reception in these terrible copies and in this dubbing kind of signified that this was like a junk cinema that didn't need to be treated seriously. This was trash, which made it great for genre film fans, but it limited how it could cross over to bigger audiences. I think that tradition still is ongoing, where even like Takashi Miike had a film come out this year called First Love. I think it's a really great movie. I think it's one of the best of the year, but it's very much sold as this kind of violent gangster movie, which it is, but there's no way in like the American critical or audience system for a movie like that to cross over into the mainstream in the way that a more conventionally highbrow film like Parasite would. Even though Parasite also has like some violent elements, it's still got this. It played at Cannes and it won the Best Picture or the Palme d'Or there, so it has like the seal of approval, whereas like the Miike film does not. Even though I think the Miike is much better than Parasite. It's this long like parallel system, and the films that are in between, like your romantic comedies, your musicals, the family dramas, melodramas, things like that, there's just no outlet at all for that kind of cinema, because it doesn't appeal to the genre fans, and it doesn't appeal to like the snooty art house fans who grew up on Bresson and Antonioni. Whereas I think in order to understand any cinema, you have to see all of the films that are coming from it. You have to see all the kinds of movies. I think the romantic comedies are just as important as the Hou Xiaoshen films and the heroic bloodshed films.
So, in your opinion, what can be done better and by whom?
I think a lot of it has to do with critics. I think critics need to do a better job of seeking out movies, because they're out there, they play, but they don't get as much press. And part of that is because the distributors are so small. Like Cheng Cheng, you're only going on what, like 30, 40 screens at most at a time. That's hard to get a lot of press coverage for that, because it's such a small release. But on the other hand, that's our job as critics. We're supposed to be finding the films that are playing in our cities that you're not going to know about because you don't have commercials on. Monday Night Football is not playing a commercial for the Takashi Miike movie. You need a critic to tell you that it's out there and that it's playing. I think a lot of critics are kind of derelict in this, in that they're only reviewing movies that the local PR firm is telling them that is playing, or that they're getting invited to a invitational press screening for, or they're getting sent that they're getting sent like multiple press releases and screeners links for, and if they're not going out of their way to review those movies, then audiences don't know about them. Like there's a number of small distributors of Chinese films in the U.S. and I think they're all doing a great job, and it's like amazing that I'm actually able to see movies like this in theaters. But every time I go to something, whether it's like White Storm 2 or like a Well-Go release or something that China Lion puts out, every time I go there, there's a significant number of Chinese Americans in the audience, and I'm the only white person, and if there's any other white people, it's somebody who follows me on Twitter. And that's kind of depressing that it's not crossing over to other audiences. I think the critic's job is to, one of the critic's primary jobs is to champion films that audiences aren't going to know about without the critic there. Like, I don't know what a critic is there for, if not to say, forget the mainstream Mark Wahlberg comedy that's playing on 80 screens in town this week. Go see this Choi Hark movie that's wild and it's like nothing you've ever seen before, and it's a ton of fun. You're really going to like it. Like that. What is a critic for, if not to inform the audience of things that they wouldn't know about otherwise?
Please write more Chen films in the future.
I try.
Would you mind sharing with us one Chinese film you think is underrated by Western critics and one Chinese film overrated by Western critics?
Overrated is easier. There's so many that are underrated.
Oh my god.
Overrated, for me, it's the big costume epics of fifth generation filmmakers from the early 90s, specifically Farewell My Concubine, which was the first. It split the palm door right with the piano. I like Yellow Earth. I like some other Chen Kai-guo films. I really liked his Legend of the Demon Cat that came out here.
Oh, cool.
I think it came out here this year, but it was actually made like 2 years ago. I really like that one. But Farewell My Concubine, it was easy to see why that was a popular film in the West, because it's tailor-made for Western audiences. It's like this big, ornate costume epic, and an American can look at it and go, oh, look at those fabulous costumes. And then, the war happens and it's like, oh, those horrible communists. And yeah, it's not a movie that I liked at all, even though I love Leslie Chung and he's amazing in it. And same with Zhang Yimou. Like, I like some Zhang Yimou movies. I think he got like this really inflated reputation in these movies with Gong Li. Like To Live, I think is kind of overrated. I think Raise the Red Lantern's overrated. But Red Sorghum, I think, is really cool, and I like some of his later movies. So I'm like hit and miss with Zhang Yimou. But yeah, it's weird to see how like their reputations have changed over the years, because when I was first noticing that there was like art house cinema in the world, like those guys were kind of the standard bearers of Chinese cinema, and they were the ones who could get their movies actually playing in American art houses. And now you couldn't get anybody to cover Legend of the Demon Cat, or Zhang Yimou's movies are so fraught with all of these various guesses about where his political sympathies actually lie, because he's had so many ins and outs with the Chinese government. But all of the reviews become about that rather than about like the actual movie itself. As for underrated, they're all underrated for underrated Chinese movies in the West. We just had the Seattle Film Critics Society. We just had our nominations come out today, and I've been trying to get people to see As Pure as White for more than a year now. Same with Long Day's Journey into Night. No nominations for either. Like Long Day's Journey into Night is, it's not my favorite movie of the year, but it's like an amazing technical achievement. It's got like this hour-long 3D tracking shot. And we nominated the Sam Mendes World War I 1917. That's like fake long uncut shots, whereas Dan actually did a whole hour-long single take thing in 3D in like his small town, and it also stars Sylvia Cheng and Tang Wei, and like yeah, so that's really frustrating. Is these movies that are the best of the year, and I can't get even other film critics to watch them and like them. So But I mean, even among people who know about Chinese films, I think Anne Wei is really underrated. I think I got to rewatch some of her and watch some of her earlier films again this year, and she really is, just as sophisticated as Choi Hark, who is much more popular over here, but she's so much more subtle about it and less bombastic and much more assured and mature a filmmaker, I think. So,
Like, I actually saw a lot of your ratings on Letterboxd. Kind of like it's hard for me to find a pattern of your taste, because I feel like you tend to like more commercial, like big Chinese films. Like you're really nice to those films, and you're kind of harsh on, low ES film.
with it's more of a matter of just like his style. Like
Mhm.
it's the really close up, shallow focus camera.
Mhm.
It makes me nauseous.
Okay.
Uh, so it's more that than anything else with him. And also that one that I saw at Vancouver, I was sitting way too close to the screen. So like if you're sitting like far away, if you're watching it on a laptop or something, it's much easier than if you're like in the third row of multiplex and everything is like right there, and it just makes it really hard to watch. I don't know. I try not to just pick one thing, either commercial or art house. I try not to write negative reviews. Like if I don't like a movie, I'm probably just not going to write about it. Like I wrote like a pan of the Lu Ye one, and it wasn't really a pan. I think I still gave it like 2.5 stars. Like my ratings tend to be inflated. I tend to like everything. Um, if I really don't like something, I will most likely just not write about it at all, because unless it's something that I need to warn people away from, like go see it thinking that it's good, then I like want to do my part to tell them that no, it's not good. But if it's like a small indie movie at a festival that nobody's going to see, I don't really feel the need to
I see.
say something really bad about it. I mean, I don't know, I just feel bad. I think of like the director's mom reading it, and I don't want to be mean.
That's really nice of you.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable championing films that I like than ripping on films that I don't like.